The human mind is one of the most beautiful, powerful, and fragile things we possess. It carries our creativity, our memories, our faith, and sometimes our pain. But what if healing could begin, not just in the heart, but in the mind? Join us for the Beautiful Mind series, 6 nights of truth, tools, and hope for mental peace and wholeness. From May 4th to May 9th, every evening at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Discover biblical insights and practical skills to help you navigate grief, anxiety, depression, trauma, addiction, and loneliness. Because peace of mind is possible, and healing is within reach.
Good evening, everyone. It is great to see each of you again. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the third night of the Beautiful Mind series. Again, my name is Jimmy Ferguson, and I have the wonderful privilege of being your host and also serving as the pastor at the Sharon Temple Seventh Adventist Church. We have with us tonight our second presenter as we continue on this fascinating journey in discovering remedies and skills for mental peace and wholeness. Plan now, again, not to miss one of these series, that each of our presenters come highly qualified. And tonight is no exception. Again, we have another highly qualified presenter who will be introduced more formally a little bit later. As always, I invite you to sit back, relax, and anticipate an enriching experience. Welcome.
After spending her early years in Jamaica and England, Dr. Beverly Gordon migrated to the United States of America in 1979. She lived and worked in California and then Michigan. She now lives in Pennsylvania, where she has spent the last 42 years. She has a strong commitment to her Jamaican heritage and has contributed significantly to education and mental health services over the years. Dr. Gordon holds a doctoral degree in clinical psychology and has degrees in counseling psychology and nursing education. She has worked in various capacities in nursing, behavioral health, and higher education since the late 1970s. With over 25 years as a registered nurse, Dr. Gordon transitioned to psychology and counseling, working with children and adolescents. In private practice, Dr. Gordon expanded her services to address family and marriage relationships as well as grief counseling. She is a certified family life educator and certified Prepare Enrich provider for married couples and persons preparing for marriage. Since 2008, she has held academic positions at DeVry University and Washington Adventist University and currently serves as chair of the psychology department at Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware. Dr. Gordon is a published author. Her notable work, Native Foreigner, addresses acculturation stress among Black immigrants. She has also contributed to various professional journals, devotionals, and served as a reviewer for several academic publications and professional conferences. Dr. Gordon is involved and active in her church and community. She was co-chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network Behavioral Health Task Force 2019 to 2020, and chair of the J.D. Tian Health Task Force 2020 to 2022. She currently serves on the Women's Commission of Montgomery County in Pennsylvania and serves as coordinator for the Family Life Ministry at her church. Dr. Gordon is a committed Christian with a passion for fostering strong human relationships. She candidly admits to a lifelong Christian philosophy that guides her work and values. She has a passion for enriching the lives of families, and a deep respect and love for young people. She has a rich background of multicultural exposure in her personal and professional life, and these experiences have translated into a delight and enthusiasm for working with people from diverse cultural, socioeconomic, and religious groups. Dr. Gordon is the proud parent, along with her husband of 45 years, of 2 fine adult sons. Of all her accomplishments, her most treasured titles are wife, mother, daughter, and friend.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here with you this evening. We're going to be talking a little bit about anxiety. Now, anxiety is something that I suspect that all of us have experienced at one time or another. The problem is that whereas there is normal, in quotes, normal anxiety, there is that type of anxiety that actually prevents us from being able to function on a daily basis in the best way that we could. So that's pretty much what we're going to talk about this evening. But we're not just going to leave it there because you see, that's the problem. But then we're going to look at the problem. We're going to look at some aspects of the problem. And then we're going to look at how it's treated sometimes. But then we're going to look at what God says about it and how we can find some relief and peace and how we can balance between using medical interventions and psychological interventions, but also always grounded in that belief system that allows us to overcome the most difficult parts of life. Welcome to this session this evening, and I pray that something that I say might be a blessing to someone and that it might also glorify God's name. So, anxiety. As I mentioned before, anxiety comes in different forms, and it can be a normal adaptive response, or it can be a maladaptive response to stressors within our environment. Anxiety is described as the apprehensive anticipation of future danger or misfortune, accompanied by a feeling of dysphoria or somatic symptoms of tension. So the focus of anxiety then is anticipated danger. And this anticipation might be internal or external. The cause, the source, the trigger might be something from within us, or it might be something within our environment. Anxiety is one of the most common mental health disorders in the United States of America. No wonder, right? As we have all experienced anxiety in some way or another, I am sure that if we think about the events in our society at this time, we can see evidence of reasons that would cause us to feel anxiety. 19.1% of the population, which translates to about 40 million Americans, experience anxiety. 1 in 4 Black Americans experience anxiety, not the adaptive form of anxiety, but the maladaptive form of anxiety. What are some features of anxiety? Well, the main feature is worry. Worry. And we talk about excessive worry. Of course, there are many types of anxiety disorders. Often when we talk about anxiety, we're looking at one particular form of an anxiety disorder, but there are in fact several diagnoses that fall within the category of anxiety disorders. We're going to talk about just maybe 4 of those tonight. Generally speaking, some of the features of anxiety include, as I said, worry, tension, tension in the body, feeling tense, nervous, not even being able to sit still, just this general feeling of impending doom. Fear is a large component of anxiety. But the difference between fear and anxiety is that fear tends to be an emotion that we experience in response to an immediate danger. So a lion is standing outside my window. Let me just look. No, there's no lion there. Okay, so a lion is standing outside my window and I feel fear because there is actual danger. If that lion comes jumping through the window, I'm going to get hurt. So it's a more realistic response to something that in the immediate situation can cause me harm. Anxiety, on the other hand, tend to have this element of worry about what could potentially happen. So it hasn't happened, but I can't sleep at night. I have insomnia. I can't sleep because my mind is racing and it's just thinking about all the possibilities. Or my family is out somewhere and I'm just thinking what could happen to them. And then I feel anxious. And then these thoughts and these feelings lead to behavioral disturbance. So it causes me to be irritable. and restless, and feeling of dread, feelings of panic. My muscles might even start to ache because actually someone has anxiety, even though it's regarded as a mental disorder, it can cause physical symptoms. And so someone might actually suffer from muscular pains. And when you seek out the source of the problem, you don't find a medical reason for the pains. You actually find a psychological reason that's grounded in anxiety. Someone with anxiety might also experience fatigue, just tired, worn out, no energy, can't get anything done, difficulty concentrating. Those are some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety. Um, Anxiety might, as I said before, may be a normal response. So the feelings of fear are usually directed towards some concrete external object or situation. The event that the person fears is within the bounds of possibility. Well, I don't think there's going to be a lion outside my window, but there could be a dog down the road who could bite me. So I might feel anxious about walking past that house because there's this big dog there that might bite me. Okay, so it's within the bounds of possibility. It involves a response to everyday challenges involving potential loss or failure. A maladaptive anxiety, in that situation, it's a response to a vague or even unrecognized danger. The focus of anxiety is more internal than external. So there's no dog down the road. But in my mind, I see things or I imagine things that could possibly cause me hurt. Anxiety disorders are more intense than normal anxiety. Anxiety state lasts longer than with normal anxiety, and the anxiety interferes with everyday life. What is happening in our bodies when we experience this anxiety is that we're having what is called a stress response. So when we experience a stressful event, there's a part of the brain that's called the amygdala. This is the area that deals with emotional processing. It sends a distress signal to another part of the brain that's called the hypothalamus. This area of the brain functions like a command center, and it communicates with the rest of the body through the nervous system so that the person has the energy to fight or flee. So when we experience something that is very stressful and that causes fear and anxiety, our body goes into overdrive. So we might have our heart is racing, our heart is racing, or respiration is increased. There's excessive sweating. We might even have a headache. Our muscle is tense. We're ready to either run away from the situation or fight whatever the situation is. You know, there's some common causes of anxiety. What are some things that cause people anxiety on a daily basis? So I'm going to talk about a few of those. One could be stress from work. Work situations can be very stressful. If you're in a situation where you feel not valued for who you are or for what you're able to accomplish, that can be stressful. If you're in a situation where you're not getting along with your colleagues or your boss, that can be a source of stress. Now, or if you're in school, if you're in college or high school, there might be situations that cause stress related to the amount of work that you have to do or the difficulty of the assignments that you need to accomplish, or big one, financial difficulties. So that can cause anxiety. So that could cause someone to start to imagine what could happen, worst case scenario, right? So I might get kicked out of school. I might not be able to finish my degree. I might not graduate, those types of things. Or it might be something to do with a personal relationship, maybe a breakup of a friendship, or maybe a disagreement, a conflict situation with a relationship, within a relationship. Sorry. Also, another source or cause of anxiety would be emotional trauma. And I just mentioned a breakup. That is one that often leaves people feeling sad, feeling worried, feeling concerned about what may happen or may not happen. Um, a chronic or serious medical condition. Sometimes it's it's interesting that sometimes we feel as if there are certain disorders or illnesses that will never happen to us. We hear it happening to other people, and we empathize and we sympathize, and we feel that, it's so sad that this person has this disorder. And then one day, that same big disorder that you never thought would happen to you happens to you, and you have no idea how you're going to deal with it. And it seems so unreal. I don't know if you've had that experience. I've had that experience. And it leaves you, even when your faith is grounded in God, you still are able to feel that anxiety because you don't know what is going to happen. And so that fear of the unknown can cause anxiety. Or a major event or performance. So some people are actually afraid or nervous about public speaking. It is said that within the United States of America, fear of public speaking is the number one fear, or phobia. I'm so fascinated by that because I actually get excited about speaking to people, and yet there are others who get so nervous that they actually can't function. I remember teaching a course one time, and there was a student. I had given the assignment for the students to do presentations, and there was a student who walked into the classroom, and he simply just took one look at everybody in the room and just turned and ran out of the classroom. He could not face the situation. These are students who he's been studying with all semester. I'm the professor who he's been talking to all semester, but now he has to get up in front of the class and actually speak, and he could not do it. He just ran out of the room. It's real. It's real. Then anxiety can also be the result of the side effect of certain medications. And so anxiety could be as if have you watched the advertisements on the television recently with these medications that have such grand possibilities? They can help you to get rid of your weight, or they can help to reduce your blood sugar and all of that. And then after they say all the fantastic things that this medication can do, in kind of in the fine print, very rapidly, oh, it can also cause, stroke and death and all kinds of things that sound worse than the disorder that you're actually trying to treat with the medication. But there are medications that can actually produce symptoms that resemble generalized anxiety disorder. And then, of course, there are individuals who use alcohol and drugs to cope, or for different reasons they use these substances. And these substances can lead to anxiety. And so you can see a representation of symptoms that resemble generalized anxiety disorder. Of course, in our society today, there are so many uncertainties, so that political uncertainty can create anxiety. There are situations right now in our society that is creating a lot of uncertainty and fear among individuals, and so they're experiencing anxiety. If one lives in an environment where there's a great deal of violence, for example, that can also cause anxiety. I remember speaking with someone recently who, while he attended primary school, I guess we would say elementary school, he lived in an area that experienced a lot of violence. There was a lot of gun violence. And he recalls sitting in the classroom trying to do his math assignment, and he couldn't concentrate because there were gunshots being fired in the environment. Now, for a child, that is traumatic, and that will create anxiety. Other things that can cause anxiety would include migration experiences. I've had some experience with that myself. And so moving into a new area where you don't know anyone, sometimes if you perhaps have difficulty with the language, difficulty with the cultural practices, getting to understand the system, the way it works, all of that can create a great deal of anxiety. Racism is a situation that's very rampant in this society, and it causes anxiety. because the manifestation of racism can be violent, it can be disruptive to one's family life. I recently heard, actually just 2 days ago, of a family who moved from Baltimore to Oklahoma, and I guess because of their physical features, it was assumed, I don't know the reason behind it, but for some reason, they were accosted in their home at night by ICE. And they were actually citizens. But because of their physical appearance and possibly their accent, they were mistaken for illegal aliens, and so, or undocumented persons, I should say, sorry. But yeah, they were mistaken and they were really roughed up. That was traumatic because you know that when you're sleeping at night and you wake up suddenly, that in itself can sometimes be disturbing. But to actually have people in your house with guns pointed at you, that anxiety is going to last for a while. On Thursday night, I'm going to talk about trauma, so I won't go too far into this one. But these are some of the relatively common causes of anxiety that people experience. I mentioned earlier that some of the anxiety disorders that are listed in what we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, it lists all the disorders that we diagnose in dealing with individuals. It actually has um, quite a few disorders. I'm not going to talk about all of them, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail either about all of them. I'll focus mostly on generalized anxiety disorder. But some of the other disorders include things like separation anxiety disorder. That is one that actually occurs in children. Selective mutism. The child is able to speak, but I want to use the word refuses to speak or selectively chooses when to speak and to whom they'll speak. So it seems as if the child is not developing normally, but usually there's an anxiety provoking trigger that is causing that. Specific phobia. This is an irrational fear of an object or a situation. Social anxiety disorder, I talked a little bit about that before, where the real underlying trigger for that one is that the person fears that they will be judged negatively by others. Panic disorder, I will talk a little bit more about that shortly, and panic attack. And you'll notice that panic disorder and panic attack are two different things. Agoraphobia, which involves a fear of leaving the safety of one's home because of fear of what might happen in a situation where the person does not have control or is not able to remove themselves from the situation. Substance medication induced anxiety disorder, anxiety due to another medical condition, and unspecified anxiety disorder. So let's talk about some of these common anxiety disorders just for a minute. Panic attack. What is a panic attack? A panic attack is a sudden onset of intense apprehension, fearfulness, or terror. And it is often a sense of impending doom. It comes on really suddenly. It might be triggered by a situation, but it might not be triggered. And the panic attack is in itself not a disorder, just a panic attack. But what happens is if the individual starts to have a series of panic attacks, then that becomes a panic disorder. It's diagnosed as a panic disorder. And there are specific symptoms associated with panic disorder. So the person might experience palpitations, pounding heart, or accelerated heart rate. Individuals have ended up in the emergency room thinking that they're having a heart attack, when in fact it's a panic attack. Sweating, trembling, sense of shortness of breath or smothering, feeling of choking, chest pain or chest discomfort, nausea or abdominal distress, feeling dizzy, unsteady, lightheaded, or faint. A sense of derealization or depersonalization. So with derealization, the person feels that everything around them is somehow off. They have this sense that everything is off. Something's not right, but they can't quite identify what it is about the environment that's not right. Things don't seem okay. Depersonalization is where the person themselves feel as if something is wrong within themselves, and that they feel as if, have you ever heard the expression that someone feels as if they're outside of themselves, looking, watching themselves do something? That's a sense of depersonalization. Um, the individual having the panic attack would have a fear of losing control or going crazy. And this sense, this fear of losing control or going crazy, along with the fear of dying, are kind of the classic symptoms of a panic attack. And other symptoms might be things like feel weakness, muscle weakness, or having chills or hot flashes. Now, those hot flashes are different from the ones that some ladies experience, okay? But that can happen in a panic attack. And it's just a terribly frightening experience. The person doesn't know what is happening to them, but they just feel completely out of control. And they really have the sense that they're going to go crazy or they're going to die. And especially if it's accompanied by chest pain or chest discomfort, they are sure that they're having a heart attack. But then when all the tests are done, there is no medical evidence to support the symptoms that you're seeing. And so that is one of the guidelines to recognize the panic attack. So when this type of event occurs more than once and in the same individual, it's a recurrent, unexpected panic attack, we say that the person has a panic disorder. Now, the typical age of onset for panic disorder is late adolescence to mid 30s. So it's usually a young person. Onset after the age of 45 is unusual. It's not impossible, but it's unusual. All right, so that was panic attack and panic disorder. I want to talk about just two more. Social phobia. I mentioned it before, but social phobia can involve a generalized fear of any social or group situation where the person feels that he might be watched or evaluated. The diagnosis is only given if the avoidance interferes with work, social activities, or important relationships and/or causes considerable distress. So there are individuals who are, we sometimes see people who we refer to as being shy. And so they kind of stay away from public speaking or any kind of public activity that would put them in the limelight, so to speak. We wouldn't necessarily diagnose them with social phobia, but it becomes social phobia when it is so severe that they're not able to function in their daily activities, their jobs, their home, in the community, that type of thing. And if it affects their relationships. This phobia, social phobia, is equally prevalent among males and females. And then the third one I want to talk about is specific phobia. Specific phobia is a strong fear and avoidance of one particular type of object or situation. Now, specific phobia is more prevalent than we often think. A lot of people in the United States of America, 10% of the population, actually experience specific phobia. Specific phobia might be to things like spiders, snakes, um, being in a close space. There are so many phobias, and I think there's a book I've heard about. I actually haven't seen this book, but I keep hearing about this book that has about some 300 different phobias. And the thing with the specific phobia is that the fear seems irrational because the person is not afraid of the danger that the object actually presents. They're just afraid of this object. And but really what it is that the object represents something. And the key to the therapy is trying to uncover what it is that this object or situation actually represents for the person, and then helping this person to be gradually exposed to this thing and able to tolerate it to some level or other. So we call it gradual exposure, uh, incremental exposure. The thing is, most people with a phobia actually don't end up going to therapy because the fear is so strong that the idea of being gradually exposed to this thing that they fear so much, the fear is too strong to allow them to even seek therapy. But this method of gradual exposure has actually been um, shown to be very effective. And so if the individual can get to the place where they can actually tolerate therapy, it would be most likely effective. Other treatments include things like relaxation training and cognitive therapy, because unfortunately, most of these anxiety disorders actually originate in the way we think about things. So cognitive behavioral therapy actually addresses how we think and tries to dispel some of the negative thought patterns that lead to some of the behavioral issues that are displayed in anxiety disorders. Um, Specific phobia is usually a benign disorder, especially if it begins as as a common childhood fear. It may last for years. It may not be, it's usually not associated with any other psychiatric disturbance. And so people with specific phobias usually function at a high level in all other respects. And so sometimes I don't know if anybody on here at this moment may have experienced a specific phobia, but it can be an embarrassing situation because the person, as I said before, is usually high functioning in most other areas. And so, the fear, having what we call an irrational fear can produce some embarrassing situations. Um, I remember, I have all these stories, but I remember a student of mine who had a fear of spiders. And it was round about, what do they call that? It was round about October 31st. The word's just gone from my mind. But that holiday that occurs, Halloween, that's it. It was around about Halloween time. And we were talking about something came up in the class discussion, and we ended up talking about Halloween. And somebody was talking about the decorations and what have you, and somebody just mentioned the word spider. And my student, I have students running out of my classroom. Now, there must be something not right about that. But anyway, she was not able to tolerate that. I could tell stories about myself too, but I'm being kind to myself, so I won't tell any stories about myself on that. All right. So what is it? Who is most likely to experience who is most likely to experience anxiety or anxiety disorders? Well, it might be someone with a genetic predisposition. Just as with other traits, the likelihood of experiencing anxiety can be inherited, influencing one's susceptibility to anxiety disorders. So your genetic makeup might be part of the cause or the underlying cause of your anxiety disorder. Then there are environmental stresses. I mentioned some of that before. So everyday life events such as job pressures, family issues, ongoing financial worries, or common sources of stress that can escalate into anxiety. Life changes or trauma, or actually, an anxiety disorder could develop at a young age as a learned behavior. We know now that for specific phobias, children can actually learn to be afraid of an object or situation based on their mother's response to that object or situation. So the child learns from the parents' response to the object, they develop that fear, and actually it becomes a specific phobia later on. All right. We talked about some of the symptoms of anxiety: excessive fear, excessive worry, difficulty concentrating, tension, a sense of foreboding, difficulty sitting still, feeling nervous, on edge, having GI problems, gastrointestinal problems, insomnia or hypersomnia, either not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. But there are two features that are very significant and prominent in anxiety disorders, and one is avoidance, and the other one is interference with daily life. Those are two characteristics of the anxiety that cause it to be a disorder. So avoidance is a huge one. And the interesting thing is that the more avoidance the person practices, the greater the anxiety. So avoidance actually increases anxiety. And yet, that is a behavior that is common for persons with anxiety. The thing that causes them worry and fear, and if you think about it, it's kind of reasonable. If being in this place or seeing this thing or talking about this thing is going to make me feel anxious and have this sense of foreboding and irritable and all of that, the natural thing to do is to avoid it. The interesting thing is that the more we face our fears, the less anxiety we actually experience. But try convincing someone who's feeling anxious that that is true. So our automatic thoughts and our cognitive distortions reinforce our anxieties. And so treatment involves trying to reduce those automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions. Let's talk about coping strategies. So what are some coping strategies that can help to reduce our anxiety? One thing to think about is control. In the particular situation or the particular source of our anxiety, what are some of the things that we can control? What are things that we can influence? And then what are things that we can't control? And so, you know, the famous saying that, we should focus on things that we're able to change and not focus on the things that we're not able to change. It sounds simple, but it's sometimes difficult because, first of all, sometimes it's difficult for people to really recognize the things that they can't control. We have a tendency to think that we can do something about things that really are completely outside of our control. But once we recognize that we don't have control over that thing, and we stop focusing on that and focus on what we can do about a particular situation and actually start doing that something, it reduces our anxiety. So think about the things that you can control, the things that you can influence, and then think about the things that you can't control. And the things that you can control, set about doing what you can in a situation. Have you ever seen a situation where there's a crisis, maybe in a family, and everybody's just all excited and out of control, talking about the horror of what's happening, and that kind of thing, and the people are just getting more anxious. The moment you start thinking about, okay, so what can we actually do in this situation? It brings a sense of calm and it brings a sense of control. We talk about locus of control, feeling that you have the power to actually make a difference in a situation reduces your anxiety. A very popular one these days, a popular coping strategy is self-care. But what does that mean? You know, the Bible says that we should love others as we love ourselves and do unto others as we would have them do to us, that type of thing. But the reality is that we have a tendency as human beings to be pretty unkind to ourselves. So someone else might get into a situation and we feel empathy and sympathy for them, and we would console them or try to help them. We get into a similar situation and we start telling ourselves how stupid we are. Oh my goodness, how could I possibly have said that? How could I have done? I'm so stupid. And we call ourselves all kinds of names that we would never say to someone else. But we would say those things to ourselves. But then over time, I wonder if it's possible to really say such bad things to yourself and feel so badly about yourself and really love other people. I'm not sure how that works. Because if I don't love myself and if I don't care what happens to me, why would I care what happens to you? So in that sense, self-care is really important. And it's not just self-care like, pampering yourself for a day, going to the spa and all that. All of that is good. All of that is good. But how about start treating yourself as if you are a person of worth? How about saying positive things to yourself instead of the negative things that we tend to say when we're upset with ourselves. And possibly, if we start practicing that type of behavior with ourselves, it might be easier for us to do it with other people. So we might become less critical. We might become less judgmental. Who knows? It might work. Try it. Some have tried it and it has actually worked. All right. So, other things that we can do to help ourselves reduce anxiety, breathing exercises, just actually focusing. I mean, there are a number of different types of breathing exercises that you might even do with a therapist, but they're just simply, even if you don't know those techniques, simply focusing on your breathing for a few minutes. Just the breathing in and out, just focusing on that. That in itself can calm you. So breathing exercises, actually exercising, vigorous exercise, you produce endorphins and other neurotransmitters that actually elevate the mood. So exercise is good, not just for losing weight and not just for building muscle, but also for improving your mood and your mindset and reducing anxiety. Listening to music. Um, there are different types of music, of course, and it depends on what you choose to listen to. But if you listen to positive music that actually reaches and creates positive emotions, that can reduce anxiety. Just taking a time out. When was the last time that you sat down and just did absolutely nothing? I think that's a no-no in this society, but it can be so relaxing. It can reduce your anxiety. Literally just sitting and just doing absolutely nothing. And while you're doing nothing, maybe in the stillness of the moment, you might even hear God's voice. I don't mean literally hearing voices, so don't go away and say, whatever. But but your mind, your thoughts will be influenced by the presence of God. And you might even feel the calming assurance of his presence in that moment. Other things that you can do for coping strategies include meditation, prayer. Prayer is a form of meditation because in that moment, as you shut out the rest of the world, and you're simply focusing on God and focusing on your conversation with God, your mind is taken to positive places. Generally speaking, worship is another form of coping strategy that can reduce anxiety. Sometimes we're tempted when we're feeling anxious or nervous or fearful or even a little sad. We feel as if we don't want to worship. We don't want to go into God's presence. But that's actually the best time to go into God's presence. Because when we go into God's presence with all of our baggage, with all of our fears and our anxieties and our doubts, I mean, he says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus gives us a prescription. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow and is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So you see, anxiety, a key feature of anxiety is worrying about what might possibly happen, what could happen. Well, one formula is to trust in God, who promises us that he will take care of us. Trust in God, who is the only one who has the ability to fully take care of us. He said, in this world, we will have tribulations, trouble, trials, but don't worry about it because he has overcome the world. And so when we give ourselves into his care, he takes care of all those things because he has the ability to do so, because he's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's the Creator. He is omniscient, omnipotent. He is able to do what he has promised, and he is not a man that he should lie. And he has promised that if we cast our cares on him, he cares for us. So that is, in my mind, with all the other treatments that are used in the field, the cognitive behavioral therapy, and even medication, because medication is sometimes prescribed for anxiety. And it does work, but of course, all medications have side effects as well. Um, and it's not a permanent answer to the problem. But trust in God is a permanent answer to the problem. Because even though we now experience troubles and trials here every day, knowing God can give us the peace that passes understanding. Because Jesus told us that he said his peace he will leave with us. His peace he'll give unto us, not as the world giveth, but he will give us peace that passes understanding. And so with all the other recommendations that we have, sorry, with all the other recommendations that we have for dealing with anxiety, feelings of worry and fear, my biggest recommendation to anyone is to trust in God. It's a particularly Christian perspective, and there are others who have other perspectives, and so they might not find this to be the solution for them. But my biggest prescription to anyone, sorry, my biggest prescription to anyone is to trust in God. And I say, if you don't believe me, try it. Because sometimes people refuse to take a particular prescription. Refuse to take a particular prescription because they don't believe that it will work, but they haven't tried it. So try it. Other coping strategies include community connectedness, social supports, calling a friend or a relative, and building resilience through facing the things that we fear, facing our fears. Boy, it's a good thing that I'm almost at the end because now I've got coughing spells. Um, so I hope that something that I have said today might be beneficial to someone. Anxiety is a natural response to fear, but if you allow that anxiety to become, if you allow that anxiety to become your go-to for dealing with anxiety and fear, if you allow that to become your response, then it can become a disorder and the treatment becomes difficult. Try to use the coping strategies early so that you might avoid the difficulties of having to deal with an anxiety disorder. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. And I don't know if we have a question time or not. I'm not sure. No, we don't. So I just want to wish you all the very best. I want to wish you the peace that passes understanding. And it is available if you make yourself available to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords.